Hello and welcome to a fascinating display of compound interest, one of my favorite things. Some say it's the eighth wonder of the world, and if you have no idea what it is, let me explain it for you poorly. To put it simply, it's how a number can grow exponentially over a period of time using just a small percentage growth per period. It's frequently talked about in finance. It's with the rate of returns of investments or money in your savings account and the like. And we're just going to do a bit of a math example here today. I don't claim to be any kind of math teacher or financial advisor of any kind. I just like compound interest and I like playing around with numbers and seeing what those numbers can grow into, changing the variables. Sue me, okay? And I hope you're interested in this. And if you're not, I completely understand. But with today's example, we're going to assume a couple things. We're going to assume that we start with $1,000. Now, for compound interest, it doesn't have to be dollars. It could be a unit of anything, 1,000 elephants, 1,000 pineapples. It could just be the number 1,000, but quite frequently in the world, it is money, it is dollars, so we're going to use dollars there for our example. In terms of our interest rate, we're going to assume that it grows 5% per period. And for this example, our periods will be years. So we're going to see how much $1,000 can grow into with a 5% year over year return, and we're going to push that out for 25 years and see what we can turn that into. Now, in terms of what the numbers are going to be showing in this example here, we're going to show obviously what the number will be in total, what this $1,000 will grow into. We're also going to see how much interest it's gaining per period, and then we're also going to see how much interest the interest is gaining. Or the actual compounding effect on this money, because it's not just going to be 1,000, it's growing by 5% per period. It's the 1,000 plus the interest from last period growing upon itself. So we're going to calculate that in this third column here, that compounding interest on the interest effect. Now, you're also going to see me struggle through a Google Sheets/Excel tutorial here. I'm sure there's more efficient equations to calculate this stuff. This is just what I use. If you have anything easier to type or a quicker way to do it and you want to let me know, that would be great. I appreciate it. But I'll also walk you through what I'm typing in this equation in case you have no idea how to do it, just so I'm explaining myself what I'm typing in these little funny boxes here. Now, for the years, for the periods, we're starting at zero because we did just start, so we do have $1,000. No interest made yet, and obviously no compounding interest yet either. Moving on to year one, after 1 year growing at 5%, and how we're going to calculate that, we're going to take the last period's amount, which is that $1,000, and we're going to add to that same amount times 5%. 5% of $1,000 plus $1,000 comes out to 1,050. Now, before we move on there, I am just going to put funny little dollar signs in my equation here. And the reason that I do this, for those of you who aren't familiar with Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel, basically it just locks in that equation is gonna take 5% every time, because sometimes these spreadsheet things think they're smarter than me and they try to predict what cells I want to use. And most of the time they're right, but I just use those dollar signs to tell them that I always want you to take 5% as the interest rate in this equation. And that's just spreadsheet etiquette there. And in case you can't do this quick math for how much interest we earned, that is $50 for the year. We gained $50 in interest. In terms of the compound interest, it's still zero, simply because we didn't start the period with any interest, so that interest couldn't grow at all there. Moving on to year two, we do get to see a little bit of building here, because these numbers are growing to $1,102.50, which is a growth of 52.50 for the period, slightly higher than that original 50. That's because we are starting to get some compounding. And how I'm going to calculate that, I'm just going to take that $50 that we started with on last year's interest, and we're going to multiply that by our same interest rate there. Use my funky dollar signs to lock that in just for the equation's sake. which brings us to $2.50 compound interest, or the interest gained on the interest. To put it simply, 5% of $50 is $2.50. Now, here's where things start to get really fun as we get this compound interest growing on itself. Year three, $1,102.50 turns into $1,157.63, or interest of $55.13. Now, to calculate the interest on the interest, we do have to get a little bit funkier with the calculation here. So what we're going to do, we're going to take, because we want it to build upon itself. We don't just want to show the interest on last year's interest. We want to show the interest on interest total. So we actually want the sum of the last 2 years of interest, and we want to multiply that by that 5% there, which brings us to $5.13 of compound interest. And what we want to do as well, I think we want to lock this in with our funky dollar signs, just so it always pulls from that $50 as our first instance of interest that we gained there. And now we can start to automate it a little bit. We have all our equations working, so we can kind of speed this along a bit. I'm not going to go year by year to check in. We're going to start checking in milestones now. And this is also going to test to see if my equations were built correctly, because we're going to jump ahead to 5 years. Clearly, something went horribly awry in my equations. Oh, I forgot the funky dollar signs because I didn't lock in my interest rates. We're going to go back and do that. And now it should fix our compound interest equation there. Yes, it does. Perfect. So after 5 years of compound growth at 5% a year, our $1,000 has turned into $1,276.28. In the fifth year, we gained $60.78 of interest, and overall, our interest itself has gained $10.78. And I know what you're thinking, after 5 years, why are we even caring about this number? $10.78, it's almost a meaningless amount, right? What is exciting about that number is it was made from money that you had nothing to do with. You put in the $1,000 in this hypothetical scenario. The interest gained on it, you can still, in a world, you can gaslight yourself into taking credit for that interest, even though you are literally doing nothing besides putting it there, which is to be commendable in itself. But the compound interest, the interest on the interest, grew from the money that you did nothing to get to begin with, and didn't. And while it did originally come from your initial investment, it is growing purely on the money that it grew upon itself. So in my head, you really had nothing to do with it. It's just your money is starting to pay you, and that money is paying you again. It's just a wonderful cycle, and it's how we're starting to get this exponential effect here. And what I'm going to do at these check-in periods, so at the 5 year mark specifically, we're going to calculate some percentage of returns here, just so you can see an overall look of what we're working with here. So how to do that? We're going to take this amount, $1,276.28, subtract it from the initial amount, and then we're going to divide that by the initial amount as well, which brings us to a fancy percentage of 27.63. And we're going to bold that because that's very important. Because even though you're only growing 5% per year, after 5 years, it's not 5%. And it's not 5 times 5, it's not 25%, it's actually 27% 0.63 growth from your initial investment of $1,000. And I think that is fascinating. But let's go a little bit even further to see how much this grows. We're going to jump out 5 more years to the 10-year mark. You're going to see those numbers really start to pick up. We're going to end year 10 at $1,628.89. That is a growth of interest for that year of $77.57, which is, again, doesn't seem like a huge jump from the original $50 a month that we got after that first year, but the compound interest has now grown over double, almost triple from the last time we checked in those 5 years to $27.57. So now it's over half of we get half of what our initial interest was just in compound interest. It sounds convoluted, but to me it's fascinating. And let's check in with a percentage as well. So again, we're taking $1,628.89 minus our initial investment here. Yeah, let me put my fancy parentheses in, dividing that by our initial amount, and that brings us to 62, and let me just turn all these into percentages so I don't do that later. 62.89% growth. And just the jump from year 5 to year 10 on your initial or your total return there is outstanding to me. And in the grand scheme of life, let me be very clear, 5% isn't great. I don't even know if I said this already. 5% would be good right now for like a high yield savings account, but in terms of investment returns, it's not really that high. So this isn't a number if you were invested, like say in the S&P or like in a total stock market index fund of some kind. This would be a very low number for you, but still goes to show the power of any percent compound interest over a period of time. So after 10 years, your initial $1,000 would have grown by 62%. And we're working with a small number here. You can plug in any number and you can plug in any percent. I personally love experimenting with these numbers, even though the base math will always be the same, but I just think it's fun. Moving on from here, we're going to push ahead another 5 years to year 15. At this point, our $1,000 has been sitting in there for quite a while. And what will we see? But a doubling of our initial investment. Finally, after 15 years, our 1,000 has turned into over $2,000 to $2,078.93, and our interest almost doubled, almost. So we got $99 that period, not quite that 50 mark. In terms of compounding, almost reached the initial investment. If you're not getting an idea of what those numbers is. Uh, you could also calculate by saying the amount of interest minus the interest you received the first time, because it's all collecting. You can see from the equation, it's collecting all of these numbers, all the interest we ever earned, adding them all together, then taking 5% of that. So we're gaining 49% compound interest, almost the amount that our money was earning in itself. So at this point, and you'll see by the percentage itself, sorry. You'll see by the percentage itself, although it's obvious from what the number actually is, our interest has overtaken the initial investment. We are at 107.89% rate of return, which means that $1,078.93 is just from interest overall, which is extraordinarily impressive. And your money basically doubled for doing literally nothing. And like I said, 5% is not a very high interest rate, but if you had that in like a high yield savings account and you just had $1,000 stocked away and you forgot about it 15 years later, it would be doubled, which is impressive, but not as impressive as the next 10 years will be. And shall we calculate it? I think we shall. To wrap up this little thought experiment we have here, 25 years of 5% year-over-year growth for $1,000 turns into, drum roll please, $3,386.35. Wow. And that interest we got that 25th year was $161.25. For those of you who do the quick math, that's 16%, over 16% of our initial investment of $1,000. We got that year just in interest. So very impressive stuff. Our compound interest is $111.25 per that year for that 25th year. Truly outstanding stuff. Our investment over tripled, and let's just calculate that percentage specifically, just so we have a full picture of what we're working with. That percentage is 238.64% growth. $3,386.35. That's how much your money would turn into in this example with a 5% year over year growth. How fascinating. That's the math. Thanks so much.